If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction. Don't Hide the Scars, a weekly podcast focused on addiction and recovery. Created by the nonprofit PAIN, Parents and Addicts in Need, and founded by Flindt Andersen.
Thomas Figlioli, Fig Newton, Tommy Figs. Thanks for joining Flindt Andersen and myself on the Don't Hide the Scars podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It's great to see you again. Hey, Flindt.
For people out there, if you're watching, Tommy's book right there. We'll get into some of the things. That's what junkies do. But one of the really reasons that I'm glad we were able to connect is, opioid crisis. Yourself, Flindt, we were joking before we hit record. Flindt was like, we can get some jackets made up, members only.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, it's funny. A guy I work with, we were talking this morning, a guy I work with just had hernia surgery. And somebody texted him yesterday to see how he was doing. And this is a guy who, you know, he don't drink. He doesn't do very straight edge, straight laced. And he said, I'm in a lot of pain and it's kind of hard for me to sleep. And I took that Oxy that they gave me, but it gave me the hiccups. So I just started taking Tylenol. And I said, it gave you the hiccups. Now, I hate the hiccups. I said, if only Oxy gave me the hiccups back in the day, maybe nothing would have happened. But yeah, it's crazy out there. You know, people are dying left and right. You know, people on my job, people on Staten Island, people in Brooklyn that I know. Every day it's something else. Every day you're hearing somebody else overdose, and you know, it's on everything now. Fentanyl's in everything. You can't get anything in the street. You know, my wife asked me, you know, what do you think would happen if you were out there? I would be dead. Right. You know, because my whole thing was like, I know what I'm getting. You know, I'm taking pills. I know what I'm getting. You don't know what you're getting anymore.
Right.
So
isn't it amazing to hear from? Isn't it amazing to hear from these guys, Tommy? These kids, especially. I know my drug dealer. Right. I mean, he or she would never give me anything that was laced with fentanyl. And I'm coming back at these kids going, do you not understand? You're a dollar sign to them. That's all you are. I don't care how much they say they love you, they like you, whatever the case may be. They just want your money and they don't care about you. But these kids don't seem to get that.
No, it's a business. And listen, I get it. You know, I get it to a point because I was a kid too, and I didn't want to listen to anybody. But sure, you know, if you just turn the TV on, if you go on social media and you see all this stuff that's happening, I mean, I don't see how you could trust anything that's out there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Right.
But you know, I don't know where to start, where to begin to tackle it. Education. I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to get out there and tell people what's going on and share your stories. And it's a scary time out there. You know, it doesn't get enough attention.
No, it doesn't. It seemed like we were getting a little bit of attention a while back, but then, you know, Biden takes over, and I don't need to make this a political thing, but Biden takes over, and then all of a sudden, you know, the news media, the mainstream news media just kind of dropped it down. Because here's what we're not talking about. We are talking about overdose. We are talking about fentanyl. We're talking about the number of people that have died, but we are not talking about the number of people that are out there still using. We're not talking about those that survived the overdose, because not every overdose winds up in death. Mm-hmm. But what do we do with these people once they are in the hospital? Let's say they make it to the hospital, they're revived. What's next? What happens next? This country has no plan for those people on where to send them for treatment, how they're going to pay for it, how the treatment centers are going to get paid for it. This thing goes a lot deeper, and I hate to say it this way, but it goes a lot deeper than people just, and I would say just, but dying of a fentanyl overdose. It's enormously huge mess that we're in here.
You know, since I wrote the book, a lot of people reach out to me, you know, on social media, and I've become friendly and friends with a lot of them. I've never met them in my life, but, you know, they come to me with some issues and I try to help as much as possible. And there's this one lady that, you know, she sticks out in my head. She said it's her nephew, but it's actually her best friend's son, and her best friend died of an overdose. And the son used to use with the mother. So the mother died of an overdose, and this kid has been using forever, and he's lost it. He's been in and out of institutions. I think she told me he's been to 29 psych wards this year, detox, outpatient, inpatient. Nothing could stop him. Nothing could help him. And all they keep doing is cycling him in and out, putting him on more psych medications, He comes out, they drop him off, all of them, and he goes back to heroin. He goes back to crack. He goes back to meth. He's self-medicating himself because he can't feel the way he's feeling. Right. And I don't know what to say to this lady anymore. What can you say if my answer is, well, he's got to be in somewhere. He's got to be treated. If she's telling me that they're not treating him, they're putting him on this medication with no follow-up, no nothing. Right. The kid's coming out, and it's a scary thing. And I sometimes I don't know what to say. And how am I going to know what to say if the medical community doesn't know what to say?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's one of the things you say too so often, Flindt. Sorry to interrupt you, but there's so many doctors, but they're not addiction medicine specialists. And these are the guys that are prescribing it, that just like they, whatever. Thinking of the guy that said, opioid gave me the burps or the hiccups. So I went to something else. I'm like, shit, I'm afraid to now, because even though mine was alcohol, but hey, something else. But it's just like that part of the medical community that is not trained to handle this. Right.
Well, and I think there's two other sides to this. The most hospitals, I would say 90% of hospitals today do not have an addiction specialist doctor on staff. That's the first thing. The second thing is the insurance companies. Now, I own a treatment center, Tommy, and the treatment centers are literally cutting down the time. If somebody's fortunate enough to have insurance, they're cutting down the time that they're allowed to keep in treatment. So when we used to love it when somebody would get 30 days. Now the average stay is 23 days. So the insurance companies need you to detox these people. Within 5 days. All right, which we all know that a detox is different for everybody, and it could be 10 days, it could be 15 days. You don't know. And now what? After 15 days, now we have 10 days of residential to try to get their heads on straight, and then get them into an outpatient program. It just doesn't. None of this makes sense, and none of this is working. That's the problem. But until this society understands, addiction and what it does to our brains, and understand the fact that there is no cure for this addiction. This is manageable. Tommy, you may agree, may not agree, but my opinion is this is manageable. I've managed for 21 years. I mean, I'm not cured, but until we get that message out, even to parents, that there is no cure, but this is manageable, man, we're just still in a mess. We're in a merry-go-round here. And we don't know what to do half the time.
Yeah, I mean, again, I wish I had the answers. And I tell people this all the time. I wish I had these magic words I could say, this magic thing I could do, but I can't. But you're right, it is manageable. But there's got to be some sort of education out there, and there isn't. And, I think too many people also think that rehab is like you go to rehab, 20 days, you come out, and you're cured. Right. And that's it. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to do counseling. You don't need to go to meetings. You don't need any program. Listen. Like you said, when I went this last time, almost 7 years ago, I was coming off of opiates, benzos, alcohol, whatever. And my detox lasted almost 3 weeks. Right. I was a disaster. So my insurance is great, thank God. And they were able to get me an extra week in there. So I was able to get that time I needed just to be, just to get my head right. Right. But, when I came out, I knew what to do because I had been there before. So I had kind of an idea, but you're getting people that are coming out straight out and they don't know what to do. Right. They think they went to rehab, they came out, they're good. And then the slightest thing that happens and they're right back to doing what they're doing because they don't know how to do anything else.
New Perceptions North, the premier drug and alcohol treatment and recovery center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised, top quality care with programs for detox, inpatient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living, support groups, and more. With 50 plus years of combined experience and sobriety, Flindt, Andersen, and Thelma Gatlin Wilson provide adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect, and a safe, comfortable environment to begin the process of recovery. To proudly create and sustain a life without addiction, call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
It's all about, it's about changing behavior, and you don't change, once you get the drug out of somebody's system and their head starts to clear up a little bit. Addiction is as much behavioral as it is anything else, a physical addiction, psychological addiction, and you don't change behavior in 20 days, 30 days, 90 days. Hell, you don't change behavior sometimes in 2 years. It's a process.
Yeah.
And we have to have something in place where we can keep these people going. But again, it's their choice also. When they get out of inpatient and we want them to go to outpatient, it's their choice. But if we had more of the families on our side and telling their kids, look, you little shit, okay, your ass is going to be in there for the next 3 to 6 months, maybe we'd have a better shot at it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, because it had that power of then going from, okay, you've detoxed, you have yet to acquire any new skills.
Oh, right.
So, hopefully we can move you to a sober living environment and, all these different things. And, we're talking, we've had conversation with people they've had, because the client is fortunate enough, a year before they return to quote unquote normal society.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
I speak at a rehab in Staten Island every other week. I go up there, and a lot of the guys there are going up to this long-term treatment center up in Garrison, New York, Mount St. Christopher's Inn, Graymore. And that's a 90-day program. And my old sponsor actually had a commitment up there. He was sober 9 years when he went to this place, and he was in the Trade Center on 9/11, and he had PTSD. So this place had a program for people that were sober, but they were sick and suffering with PTSD from 9/11. Right. And he went up to this treatment center for that. And part of his, aftercare was to do this commitment and bring speakers up there. And he did it. Wow. He did it every other month, the third Saturday of every other month for 13 years. Wow. And he can't drive anymore because he can't see. So he gave it away. But I used to go up there with him every other month on the Saturday. And this place was unbelievable. It's very, very spiritual, very hands-on. I know 50 people that came out of that place that are just doing great because of what they did up there. And that time that they had, they did a month here, 2 months here, then they went up there for 3 months. And they, sometimes the longer you're away from it, the more you're away from it, the more you can get your head on straight, the more you can get those behaviors in check, at least to a point. But either way, when you come out, you still have to keep it going. You still have to be around something, whatever that is, whether it's counseling, whether it's meetings, whatever. I used to be very rigid on there's only one way to do it. There's more than one way to do it. Whatever you're comfortable with, do it. But you got to do something. You can't come home, sit on your couch, do the same things you were doing before you went in and expect not to use again, because the same person that you were is going to use again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. Education, maybe some reading, like your book becoming more mandatory. Let's help people connect to Tommy's story, because yours might just be the story that somebody needs to hear to get it. Let's jump back to childhood, because it was interesting, my brother.
Yeah. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, Dyker Heights, Bensonhurst area, right on the border, Italian, Irish neighborhood. A lot of wise guys out in the street that we looked up to. My father looked up to them too. My father was half in, half out. He wanted to be in, and he had a couple of businesses that were fronts. And, he was at Essential Casting with the hair and the chains and the watch and the whole nine, and I opened the book up after my intro with the story when I was a kid. And I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. And, you know, I go outside and all these older kids that I looked up to, they were all hanging out. And I walk up to them, they handed me a wiffle ball bat, the yellow bat wrapped in black tape, stuffed with wet newspaper, made it feel like a real bat. And they told me to go hit a kid in the head with it. And, you know, I knew it was wrong, but I wanted them to accept me. So I grabbed this bat. I walked over to this kid. I swung. I hit him in the side of the head. He started crying. He went inside. I go back to the friends, you know, the older guys. They're all high-fiving me, patting me on the back. I'm happy for about 10 minutes. I go back to my house. Now I'm upset because this kid was a nice kid. You know, he didn't deserve what I did to him. I did it for no reason. So now I feel bad. And now the kid's father comes to my house. He's yelling and screaming at my mother. And my mother just turns around to me and says, wait till your father gets home. You know, my father never laid a hand on me. He didn't have to. He was just a very intimidating guy. And, you know, one look, and that's all it took. But I was scared. You know, I was like, this guy, he's going to beat the shit out of me. And so I'm upstairs and I'm waiting for him to get home. And I hear the car pull up and I look outside and I see the gate open and I'm like, oh, here we go. So he calls me downstairs and I go down and he says, let's go. And I walk out and I'm like looking at my mother. My mother's just like, hey, you did this to yourself, you know, deal with the consequences. I get in the car. He drove a big white Cadillac at the time and he drives me. He doesn't say anything. He's just got his oldies music on and he's just driving. He doesn't say anything to me. Pull up on a street, he parks the car and he just turns around to me. He looks, he used to wear glasses and he looked over his glasses at me. And he said, Tom, what happened? Why'd you hit this kid in the head with the bat? Now in my head, I'm like, I can't tell him that these other guys made me do it. You know, he'll think I'm a little punk. So I lied. I told him the guy pushed me and he made fun of mommy. So he looks at me and he's like, okay. He goes, all right, let's go. And he takes me into a restaurant and walk in the back and I see all his friends sitting in the back of the restaurant. And they're all looking at me and they start to laugh. And I turn around and my father's grinning ear to ear, smiling, proud of his son that hit this kid in the head with the bat for making fun of his mother and pushing him. And they bought me ice cream. They gave me money. They patted me on the back. And I realized like these guys, they were 40, 50 years old. They were just the older versions of those older guys in my neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
And my father was just an older version of those guys. And I wanted to be accepted by them. I wanted to be accepted by him. So doing this and doing something that wasn't me and getting out of myself rewarded me the very first time I did it. And that was basically my life after that. You know, He told me, he goes, just don't tell your mother, we did this. How I told you never to do it again. Right. And that was it, you know. But after that, you know, relatively normal childhood. You know, I played baseball. I played hockey, went to school. I was a good student. I had a lot of friends, always outside playing. Then at like 15 years old, my mother and father started having problems. 16, he calls me down to the house one day, tells me that he's leaving. And at that point, I was happy because, you know, our relationship had deteriorated and I didn't like being around him anymore. You know, he was a bad gambler. He was a serial adulterer and just not a nice guy to be around. And he left. And as much as I wanted him to leave, you know, I was upset because this is the first guy I looked up to. I looked at this guy like a superhero when I was a kid. And now he's not that. And now he's leaving. So now I'm 16 years old and I start gravitating towards the streets. And those guys that were in my neighborhood that were sitting on the block, just playing ball and wiffle ball and telling me hit some kid in the head with the bat. Now they're on the corners, they're in the schoolyards, they're drinking, they're smoking. And in my head, I'm like, well, if I'm going to go up there, I have to do what they're doing. And that's what I did, you know, from a very young age, 16 years old. I remember the first time I drank, it was the day after I took my SAT to get into high school. No, it was the day of. So we took it on a Saturday afternoon. Saturday night, me and my friends bought a bottle of vodka, a bottle of peach schnapps. And my friend had an 84 Grand Prix across the street from my house. We lived on this private block. And his father had bought him this car. We weren't even old enough to drive it, but his father bought him this car. And we used to just sit in it all the time and listen to music. So that night, we went to a party at my friend's house. Then we went back, we sat in the car, and we were just doing shots. I had a bottle. Peach schnapps vodka, peach schnapps vodka, peach schnapps vodka. And after the first round, I get out, I go to this party, and there's this girl that I like. And I just went right up to her and I started talking to her. And I was funny. and she liked me, and she was laughing, and she was like touching my arm, and I didn't even think about it. I liked this girl for 2 years. I couldn't talk to her. Right. That night, went right up to her, talked to her, and I was like, wow. I was like, this stuff works. You know? We went back to the car. We finished off the bottles. I got deathly ill, throwing up all over the place. Peach schnapps. My friend's car smelled like peach schnapps to throw up for 5 years until we sold it. So we go back down the block. I pass out in the middle of the street. He gives me a beating for throwing up in his car. All I remember, the next day, I wake up on the floor of my bedroom. I lost my sneaker. I had a beeper back in the day. That was like the thing to have. Right. I lost that. I felt terrible. And both of my friends called me. They got caught. So they got in trouble. They got punished. I go downstairs, expected to get in trouble. My mother's sitting there making me breakfast. So I'm like, all right. I got away with it, you know? And I had fun. And even though I feel like crap right now, I can't wait to do this again. Right. And that's how it started. You know, alcohol just did for me what I couldn't do for myself. It made me funny. It made me good looking. It made me charming. It took away the anxiety and fear that I didn't know I had. You know, I always had this feeling, but I didn't know what it was. I was a kid. You know, looking back on it, that's what it was. And as soon as I had that alcohol, that went away. Right. You know, long story short, like 2 months later, I quit the hockey team and I'm up in the schoolyard drinking all the time. Yeah. And that's all I wanted to do, you know.
It's interesting how you bring up too, concerning your dad and the incident with the kid, is that the manipulation for the sake of A, dodging the consequence, and B, people pleasing and acceptance started that young.
Yeah.
Because I know for me, that was kind of the thing. Yeah. I lie about this, or I do this thing, you know, dad going to accept. And it's really interesting how we start those coping things really early on. Yep. That when we get into as 12-step people, rigorous honesty, right?
Yeah, you start seeing all this stuff so glaringly obvious that when you were in it, you just didn't see. You know, so now I'm 17 years old. I'm up on the corners. I'm up in the schoolyards. I'm drinking. I'm smoking pot. I'm smoking cigarettes. And, you know, I was a good student up until that point. So I was still able to get a scholarship to college. And the best thing that happened to me, even though I still turned out how I did, was that I got out of Brooklyn. You know, I went up to Westchester for 5 years, actually 7 years. I was in school for 5 and I lived up there for 2 more after. And, you know, a lot of my friends got in trouble, stock market, boiler room stuff, and whatever. A lot of them got locked up. Some of them just got, you know, in some trouble. But I stayed away from that. But I got into my own, you know, form of trouble out there. And it was a nonstop party. Like I went to college. I lived on a college campus and I drank and partied for 5 years.
Absolutely. I call myself a 5-year senior, Tommy.
Yeah, I say it all the time. Well, I call it in the book. It was a big party with a $20,000 a year cover charge. And I had like 10 people that I went to college with say, you couldn't be more right. That's what it was. Right. And that's exactly what it was.
Right.
But I say that, but I look back on it and I had people that drank with me, but I drank with a different group of people every night. You know, I would just follow the people who were drinking and drink with them. And I had my steady people, but even those people would drink, they would go to sleep, they would wake up, they would go to class, they would study, they would take their tests, they would do good. And then they go out and they drink again. Me, I would drink. I wouldn't wake up. I wouldn't go to class. I wouldn't study. I wouldn't do well. At my first semester, I almost got thrown out of school. You know, I got a 1.6. I got put on academic probation. I got in trouble for destruction of property because when I was drunk, I decided to kick out all these wooden banisters in one of the dorms. And some girl, you know, ratted me out. I got away with it, you know, but I almost got thrown off for that. And, you know, I did what I always do. I manipulated and I wrote a letter to the school saying, you know, I'm having a hard time with my family at home and my father left and my mother can't afford it, yada, yada, yada. And they said, all right, well, you can't get your scholarship back. But if you do well enough this semester coming up, you get a 3.0 just this semester, we'll give you a grant that subsidizes the scholarship and you'll be able to come back. And that's what I did. Right. That semester I more or less went to class here and there. I studied, I took the tests. I smooth talked to a couple of professors. I got a 3.0 and I was able to stay on campus. And that was my whole college life. I would do terrible and then I would weasel my way back in.
Right.
And, eventually I became a resident advisor, a resident assistant. I was in charge of the dogs and everything. I was terrible. I was terrible at the job. I was never there. I used to drink with my students. It was awful. The only person I ever had to write a complaint to was my ex-girlfriend, who got alcohol poisoning in my room, and the ambulance had to come. So I had to write her a complaint for being drunk on campus, And so that was my college life. And, 21 years old, I was in this bar so much. It's called Foley's Club Lounge in Westchester. And the owner was a really great guy. He was in his late 30s at the time. And I was always looking for that father figure, that older guy to look up to.
Yeah.
And he was that. And I was in there a lot, and he took a liking to me and a couple of my friends, and he gave us jobs, and I would bartend there a couple of nights a week. I would drink for free. I would eat for free, keys to the place. And that became my home, became my home away from home. And then I got a call from a guy in Brooklyn. He was a bookmaker. He had just gotten out of jail. And he asked me if I wanted to work for him. He asked me if I wanted to take bets. And that was my father. My father was in that life.
Right.
And right before my father passed away when I was 21. And he said to me in my ear, my mother used to invite him over for Christmas. After all the stuff that he did to her, he wound up being homeless. He wound up living in an assisted living facility in Staten Island. And she felt bad for him, so she used to invite him for the holidays. And one Christmas Eve, he was sitting next to me at the table, and I hadn't talked to him in probably 2 or 3 years at that point. And he just whispered in my ear. He said, "Tommy, I'm sorry for what I did. Don't do the things I did, because look where it got me." And I said, all right, whatever. I didn't want to hear it at the time.
Sure.
But then, a few years later, I get the call on the phone, and I'm doing exactly what he did,
Right.
Yeah.
And so I started working for this guy. And now I think, I'm the second coming of, Christopher Moltisanti from The Sopranos. I'm walking around with jumpsuits on. That's, and that's what I want. Listen, that's what I wanted to be.
Sure.
And this was my thing now. So now I'm a bartender and I'm a bookie. And the girl at the time, she just didn't want any part of that. And the relationship was on the rocks. So we split up. And now I'm with new people. Now I got to start dating again. I'm still that kid. I'm not comfortable in my own skin. And these people are doing drugs. They're taking ecstasy. So I'm like, I really don't want to do this. I had taken ecstasy a couple of times when I was younger. I was scared because I heard all these horror stories about, it's cocaine, heroin, your heart will explode. But one night I drank enough, and he gives me one, and I took one. And I remember that night, I took 7 more that night.
Whoa.
And at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and outside, there was these townhouses on campus that I used to hang out at the school still. And I was playing basketball by myself with no shirt on. And my friend Brinsley, who's in the book, the kid from Boston, he comes out and he's like, "What are you doing?" in his Boston accent. And I was like, "I don't know, but I want to go to church." And I made this poor kid walk to church with me all the way down this Bedford Road. It was like half a mountain. We get to the steps of the church. I looked down. I said, "Oh my God, I got no shirt. I can't go to church." I made this kid walk backed out of my face on ecstasy. And then I took ecstasy every day after that for like 6 months. That's how I do everything, And then one night I go for the ecstasy, he doesn't have it. And he hands me a foil packet. I'm like, "What's this?" He's like, "It's Larry." He called cocaine Larry. He goes, "It's Larry." I said, "What's Larry?" He goes, "It's Coke." I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't want to do cocaine. That's like another thing I don't want to do." But 10 minutes later, I'm in the bathroom and I break the line up on the toilet tank and I do the line. I get up, my teeth are numb and my back of my throat's numb, and I'm not drunk anymore. I've been drinking all day.
Yeah.
Right.
And I now I could go for another 3 hours. I'm like, wow, I like this stuff.
Yeah.
And that was, I rarely ever drank again without cocaine being involved, and I drank every day. So that's what cocaine did. And now I start selling drugs because now I have no money. So now I'm trying to sell drugs, but I'm terrible at it because I'm doing all of them. So every time I buy the drugs to sell, I wind up losing money. I'm gambling now. So all the money I'm making from taking the bets, I'm just giving back to the guy. I'm in this bar. I'm a bartender, but I'm drinking constantly. So I'm like a bartender, I'm a bookie, I'm a drug dealer, my best customer in all three. And now I'm starting to burn bridges. I'm starting to steal from the register. I'm starting to borrow money from the guy who owned the bar to pay my rent. And then I'm stealing from his own register to pay him back.
Right.
And that's just the things I did, And people started to notice, he had sat down with me and asked me if I needed help. I told him, no, I'm fine, blah, blah, blah. I burnt bridges, and it was time for me to leave. Police were looking into me up there for something I wasn't involved in. And a lot of cops used to come into the bar and hang out, and they liked me. So they kind of gave me the hint. And I wasn't doing it. They were looking into me for selling weed to high school kids, which I wasn't doing. But they knew what I was doing. So they're like, listen, kid. He used to call me Carbone from Goodfellas. There's a big Irish cop. He's like, listen, Carbone. He goes, I know you ain't doing this, but you're doing this, this, and this. So it's probably best you go back to the motherland, talking about Brooklyn. So I called my cousin up, and I had interned at a Wall Street firm when I was a kid. And I called her up, and they were looking for somebody in the accounting department. And, I had the degree to do it, and I had the experience there, and they knew me. So, the interview was a formality. I went, I got the job. I moved back to Brooklyn in May of 2000, Memorial Day weekend of 2000. And I said, when I wasn't doing the coke and ecstasy, I was fine. When I was just drinking, smoking weed, nobody was trying to intervene on me. I wasn't stealing from anybody. I wasn't getting in trouble. So if I just drink and smoke weed, I'll be fine. So the famous last words. So I get home, and the first night I'm home, I go into my friend's basement, and the basement at the beginning of the book. And I go into the basement, and they're smoking pot out of a bong made out of a Heineken keg. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm home. So that's what I did. I drank, I smoked weed, I went to work, I got paid, and I was good for like 2 months. That one night, I'm drinking, and that bell went off in my head. You get that alcohol in you, and now you want the coke. I didn't know my friends knew where to get that. I had been away for a while. So I asked one of them, he's like, yeah, of course we know where to get it. And, it was off to the races. And now it's, now it gets to an 8 ball a night, and drinking every night. And now I'm starting to get physically sick from it. I'm waking up in the morning with the shakes, the withdrawals from the alcohol that I don't know what it is, combined with the anxiety from the cocaine. So I think I'm dying every day. Every day I go to work, I'm sweating, my skin's pale, my skin's gray. I can't eat, I can't sleep. And I go to the emergency room, and they tell me there's nothing wrong with me. I go to the doctor, he tells me there's nothing wrong with me. I'm missing work. Finally, I went to my mother's boss, who's a doctor, and I sat down with him. He's like, Tommy, what's going on? And I told him, I said, listen, I think I'm dying. And he goes, listen, you're not dying, you little asshole. You're fine. You're 25 years old. And in my head, I'm like, if you knew what I did last night, you would understand why I think I'm dying.
Right.
And he goes, well, Tom, he goes, do you drink? And I was like, here and there, every once in a while, I have a few beers watching the game. And he's like, do you do drugs? I'm like, nah, no drugs, doc. He's like, all right. And, listen, he had a soft spot for me. And I actually talked to him a couple months ago. He read the book and had a soft spot for me. And with what I told him, he just wanted to make me feel better. So he goes, listen, when you feel like this, take one of these. And he prescribed me Ativan.
Oh, there we go.
And I remember telling him, my mother's sitting in the room. I'm like, I'm not taking those. I'm not going to be hooked on drugs. That's in my head. That's what I'm saying. So I take them home, and, I continue to do what I do for like a week. And then one day I wake up and I couldn't get out of bed. So I'm like, let me try to take one of these pills and see what happens. I take one of the pills. 20 minutes later, I'm fine.
Right.
Like nothing ever. Like I didn't do anything the night before. I get up, I get dressed, I go to work. Ativan turns into Klonopin.
Yep.
My solution, I go out, I drink, I do the 8 ball. I come home, I go to sleep for 2 hours. I wake up shaking, sweating, throwing up, taking Ativan, taking Klonopin, good to go. I go to work. I did this for 2 years.
Yeah.
And in February of 2002, I asked for help. I didn't want help. I was just under so much pressure from everything that I figured, let me get out of here. So I write this letter to my aunt and my mother that they kept for years. I have it in my drawer inside. It's in the book. And I'm basically telling them that I have this problem and I can't stop and I need help. So they call the same doctor and they tell me I'm going to go to rehab. They drive me to Long Island. I'm in the backseat of the car. And I remember him telling me, make sure you have something in your system when you get here to go into the detox. I took that as to take all the Klonopin I had left.
Of
Of course.
So I get there. I'm in the backseat of the car. And I remember him knocking on the window, and I get up and I look at him, and they take me in and they interview me in the emergency room and whole 9 yards. Long story short, they take me up in an elevator. The door opens, door slams shut. I look, and I'm like, this is not rehab. Not the rehab I saw on TV.
Sure.
And the doctor looked at me and said, the doctor you spoke to downstairs was a psychiatrist. This is the psych unit of the hospital. And we're going to keep you here for a couple of weeks. And right then I was like, oh my, like, what's going on? How did I get here? I'm like, I don't belong in psych. Get me out of here. Get me out. And my mother is standing there crying. My aunt is there crying. The doctor is there half crying. And they all thought I belonged there. So, they leave. I get on the phone to all my friends. I'm like, come get me out of here. They all thought I belonged there, so they're not coming to get me. So I'm like, I guess I'm stuck here. So I go to my room and I'm crying and I'm poor me. And how did I get here? And how did my life get to this? And a lady knocks on the door and she tells me there's an AA meeting down the hall. And I said, I'm not here for alcohol. I'm here for cocaine, but thank you anyway. And she said, listen, she goes, you're in bad shape right now and you really don't have anything better to do. So maybe you should go down there and listen.
Right.
So I said, all right. So I go down and I listen. And the guy who spoke, he was a guy from Staten Island. And he told a story about driving over the Verrazano Bridge to buy crack in East New York. And he would spend all his money. So he would have to collect cans to get back over the bridge. As soon as I heard that, I'm like, I stopped listening. I compared myself to him. And I said, this guy is a 50-year-old crackhead. I'm 26 years old. I did a little too much cocaine. His story will never be mine. So I can't listen to this anymore. And I basically told him as much after the meeting. And, he understood, he understood the shape I was in. And he talked to me. He said, listen, kid, if you keep thinking the way you're thinking, you're going to keep doing the things you're doing. Sooner or later, your story will be mine, whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. And, he shook my hand. He wished me luck. He gave me a big book, which I didn't know what it was at the time. I go back to my room. I put that book in my bag. I tell them everything they want to hear for the next, 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks. And I get out of the place on a Monday morning at 10:30. I get home Monday night at about 6:30. I look in the mirror and I don't know what to do. We were talking about it before, you go and you detox and I felt good. Like I was healthy. I slept, 8 hours a night for 2 weeks. I ate 3 meals a day. I was talking to people about, even though I was full of shit trying to get out of there, I was still talking about things. So I felt good, but I still didn't know how to live. I had no recovery in me. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to do anything without alcohol in me. And I didn't like the way I felt in that way. So I remembered I put a Tylenol with codeine in my top drawer right before I left. I remember taking that. I called my friend. I said, I'm home. I'm coming down the block to watch Raw. I'm going to go get some 40s. And he said, no. He goes, didn't you just get out of the tank? I was like, yeah, that was for coke. I'm not going to do that. And, they were like, all right, cool, I guess. And I went down there and, 8 hours later, I'm drinking. And 3 days later, I'm at a house in Hunter Mountain doing coke in the bathroom, right. And about 2 months later, I take my first OxyContin 80 and I took a half an OxyContin 80 because I thought 80 was too much. I broke it in half, not knowing about the time release thing. Mm. And, it hit me at once and I got deathly ill, but it was the best thing I ever felt. And it's the way I wanted to feel all the time. So it scared me off for about a month or two because of how sick I got. But then like a month or two later, I said, well, this time I won't break it in half and I won't drink. And I took it and I loved it. And I did that every day. And I said, well, if I drink, imagine how much better it'll feel. Right. And then it was that 80 turned into 800 milligrams a day. And the alcohol and the cocaine turned into crack. And 3 years later, I'm in the street collecting cans for crack money, just like the guy in the psych ward told me. Yeah. And I'm stealing soda cans from my mother's basement to return so I could get, drug and alcohol money. And that's where it took me. And, at 29 years old, I was in a house in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania with my cousin with a shotgun under my chin, wanted to end my life because I couldn't live the way I was living anymore. I hated my life. I hated what I was doing. All my friends I robbed all of them. I did things to all of them. So none of them were talking to me. I was by myself. I was by myself. I didn't want to use it anymore, but I didn't know how to stop. I hated the way I felt when I was on it. I hated the way I felt when I was off of it. It was a terrible place to be, and I understand. I used to have this stigma towards suicide, but I understand what people could get because I was in that head. And, grace of God, whatever, I didn't do it. I thought better of it, but I didn't stop. I went home and I used for another 6-8 months. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my aunt, my cousin and my mother again, sat in the living room, and I basically fifth-stepped them. I told them everything. And these poor women were just standing there. And my cousin had been clean for years. She used, back in the day, she used to take pills all the time. So I'm telling them all this stuff. And they just look at me with their mouth open because they knew, but they didn't know the depths of it.
Right.
And I said, listen, this is it. But I said it a million times before, and I wouldn't blame if they didn't believe me. But I knew in my heart that night, I was like, this is it. I need to change something. And I did. The next day was a Sunday. I laid low. And then Monday, I registered in an outpatient program. And I went to my first AA meeting, and I raised my hand and I introduced myself. And those people took me in. I was 29 years old. And those people took me in like I was their kid. This is not that long ago. It was 2005. So it's 17 years ago. Sure. But I feel like there was not as many young people in the rooms as there is now. Right. So I was like a baby when I went there. And these people really took me in. They took me in as their child. I still have people to this day that call me their son, their AA son. And, I learned how to live through those people. And little by little, my life started coming back together, and I started working, and then I got another job, and then I finally got the city job that I'm still on today. And I started doing the right thing. I started helping my mother out. I stopped lying. I stopped stealing things. I started living the right way. I started doing the things that a human being should do. And, slowly but surely, my friends started coming back into my life. And things are great. Then days turn into weeks, into months, into a year. And I'm sober a little over a year. I meet the girl, and now I got the girl. I get the new car. Now I got the girl in the car. Then I move out of my mother's house, and I got the girl, the car, the apartment, the job, the money. And I'm like, all right, I don't have to go to a meeting all the time.
Oh, did you go through that, Flindt? I've gone through that. Yeah,
and it wasn't consciously at the time. It wasn't like at the time I was like, all right. It was just like, all right, I usually go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm not going to go on Monday anymore because I really don't like that meeting. I'll go on Wednesday every other week because I like the guy who hosts it every other week. And I'll go to my home group. And I went to my home group every week. But we had a thing we called the crew. And we had a kitchen there. And we used to go there early. We used to cook. We used to make dinner, eat like a family, talk, whatever. And then they would sit in the meeting, and I would go in the kitchen and sit with the people who didn't want to be there. And I would point fingers. And I'd be like, this one's talking about that again. This was so that's what I did. And I was saying, I'm going to meetings, but I really wasn't. I was going to the place where the meeting was, but I wasn't mentally there, And then the girl I was with at the time, she was in the rooms, and, she had her issues with alcohol, drugs, and food. So she was with one program. She really wasn't in, alcohol and AA or NA. So she didn't want to go. So I'm like, I'll just stay home with her, and then, we'll make each other better. Long story short, 2008 comes around. I celebrate my 3 years. About 6 months later, I hurt my back on the job, and I go to the doctor, and there's a story that goes before this, but long story short, I go to this doctor knowing full well what he was going to do. Yep. And he writes me a prescription. He writes me a prescription for Vicodin. And I'll never forget the prescription. It was Vicodin, 40 Vicodins, 7.5, 750s with 4 refills. And I took that prescription, I put it in my pocket, and I got sick. I got physically sick.
Wow.
Because I knew like my blood drained from me.
Yep.
And I left the place, and I got in my car, and I drove to the avenue up by my house, and I parked in front of the spot, And I called my friend up and I said, Chris, they gave me this prescription. I don't know what to do, but he goes, throw it away, come to my house. I was like, all right, I'm going to throw it away. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung the phone up. I was parked outside a pharmacy. I walked in the pharmacy. I filled the prescription. I put the bottle of pills in my car. I went to his house. And I didn't tell him.
Yep.
And I brought that prescription home with me. And I was out of work. I was on medical leave. And every morning I'd wake up eating cereal and I'd put that bottle on the table and I would stare at it, like just torturing myself. And one day I was like, you know what? My back hurts today. I'm going to take one. I'm going to take one Vicodin as prescribed. I'll be fine. And I took one Vicodin and I drank a Manhattan Special with a coffee soda. And I'm sitting in the chair and I'm waiting. I'm just waiting and nothing's happening. I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm good. My back feels better. I'm good. I get up to put the bowl of cereal in the sink and it hit me, that opiate feeling.
Yep.
And I knew right there. I was like, oh boy, this is not good. And I said, it didn't happen right away. I hear a lot of people say pick up right where you left off, but that wasn't the case with me. But the obsession did start right away. I waited 6 hours or 4 hours, whatever it was, to take that next Vicodin, but I drank 5 Manhattan Specials with it because I wanted that caffeine to kick in and hit me harder. And I obsessed about, should I take one? Should I take one? No, I'm not in pain. Should I take one? Now it's 6 hours. I could take one. I said, yeah, let me give it to my girlfriend. I said, take these home with you. I can't have them in the house. I call it 20 minutes later. All right, bring one back. I was like, just flush them down the toilet. Flushes them down the toilet. The next day I go and I refill it. And I go through the same process. I did this 3 times. And finally I was like, I got to stop. I got to stop. This is going to get out of control. It was a few months later. And I did. I stopped for about 6 months. But I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody what happened. And it was killing me inside. And my 4-year anniversary came around. And I celebrated, knowing full well I wasn't sober, knowing full well that I relapsed.
Yeah.
But rationalizing it in my head, saying it wasn't alcohol, so I could celebrate it. And it was for my back. I didn't really relapse, but I knew I relapsed. So I celebrate. I get my 4-year coin. And my first 3 years, the first time around, and these last 6, I always put my coin on my keychain. It's something I'm very proud of. It's something that I want to remind myself of. I couldn't put that coin on my keychain. I went home. I put it in my top drawer. I never looked at it again. And that ate at me for like the next 3 months. And me and my ex-girlfriend were going to Atlantic City one day. And I was like, I'll be right back. I forgot something in my house. And I drove to the pharmacy. I had 1 refill left. I drove to the pharmacy. I got the bottle and I took like 6 of them. And I just drank it and drove to Atlantic City. And that's where it started, like next thing you know, 20, 30, 40 pills a day, withdrawals every morning, can't get out of bed without them. That lasts for about a year. February 2010, I come clean. My same guy, Chris, I tell him my story. It was Super Bowl Sunday 2010. He tells me I should go away. I said, I don't want to go away. I don't want work to find out. Overtime, this, that, the other thing. I got bills to pay. I heard about this stuff called Suboxone. I think I'm going to try that. And he didn't recommend it. I wanted to do it my own way. And I'm going to preface this by saying I believe that it has its place, not with me. I just didn't do it the right way. I abused it. I go there. I get the prescription. I'm supposed to, be on it for this amount of time, come off of it. And I was doing that the right way for about almost 2 years. And then 2011, I had surgery on my foot. I was just about to come off of it. And they took me off of it for like a couple of days so that they could give me the medication for the surgery, for the anesthesia. And then they gave me Vicodin for after the surgery, which I did it this time around. I did it the right way. I go back to work about 2 months later. I'm playing softball on a Sunday. About a week after I go back to work, I step on the same foot that I just had surgery on, and I snapped the plantar fascia in my foot. So I have to have another surgery. This time I don't get out of it. I go, I do the thing. I I take the Vicodin, I abuse it. I'm buying Percocets in the street. And that was it. That was it. And once I found out that I could break through Suboxone with enough pain medication, it was just a hamster wheel after that. And, the next 6 years were just 5 years were just a mess. I had an elbow surgery. I had a surgery on my prostate from the overuse of anabolic steroids. I got into a car accident. So I was on and off prescribed pain medication. I was swindling pain medication. I was doctor shopping. By this time, the anxiety kicked in from the massive withdrawals I was going through and the Xanax I was buying in the street. So I went to my mother's doctor and she gave me Valium, referred me to a psychiatrist who gave me Klonopin. And within 3 months, I had him up to the max dose of Klonopin. And I had another guy giving me Roxy's, and I had the other guy giving me Suboxone. And I'm buying prescriptions in the street off of people in my neighborhood. And that's just where it goes, And, 2015, I moved out to Staten Island. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not around the neighborhood anymore. I'm not around all those people. So I found one doctor in Staten Island that gave me everything that I was getting from 3 different ones in Brooklyn. And that's where it went. And I'm on Roxy, Suboxone, Xanax, Klonopin, Adderall now, and just a disaster. And it was only a matter of time. Like I just couldn't. I say it all the time. It was like trying to hold a dam shut, and I just couldn't hold it anymore. And I actually tried to come off of Klonopin myself, and I did. I weaned myself off. The doctor actually told me he was going to cut me off, and so I was like, all right, if you're going to cut me off, I said, at least give me the 1 milligram so I could wean myself off. So he's like, all right. So I weaned myself off for a month and I felt terrible, but it was bearable. Like, I was shaky, but it was, I was still going to work. I was still, functioning, still taking Suboxone. I was still taking Oxy, but I figured, one thing at a time. So I go to the same doctor for my Suboxone the next month. And this guy used to just write down in a pad what he gave me. And he flipped the page back, and he must have flipped it back 2 months instead of the 1 month. And he just wrote the prescription for the Oxy, the Suboxone, and the Klonopin. And he gave it to me. And instead of saying, I don't take this anymore, I took them. I drove to Brooklyn. I drove to one pharmacy in Staten Island. I dropped off the Roxy. I drove to the other pharmacy in Brooklyn for the Klonopin, the Suboxone. I got out and I went and I took 10 Klonopin at once, 10 2-milligram Klonopins. I just popped them. And then it was off to the races after that. And I started taking Xanax, buying Xanax in the street. I was up to about 200 Xanax sticks a week on top of all the prescribed medication. And, January 2016, there was a blizzard. My department fights snow, and I didn't show up for work, and that was the first time I didn't show up for work. I mean, I didn't show up for work sick, but that was the first time I didn't call and didn't show up. Sure. And then the next day I called out sick, and there was a blizzard, winter storm Jonas, one of the biggest that New York ever had. And I remember shoveling Diana out of her parking spot. She went to work, and I sat in my car and I called up my dealer and I said, I need 200 more Xanax. And he said, 200 more? He goes, I just gave you 200 like 6 days ago. I was like, listen, I need 200 more. Can you get this for me or not? He said, oh, they'll be in your locker when you get there. I sat in that car for like an hour, and I don't know what happened. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I couldn't go. I couldn't go and get them. It just hit me again. I was like, I got to stop. I can't keep doing this. I'm either going to die or I'm just going to destroy everything I have. So next thing I know, I'm on the couch. I called up my friend who I had helped out a couple of years earlier, and he put me in touch with the employee assistance unit. And I called them. I went there the next day, told them my story. They told me, you got to go away. I said, no problem. I'll do whatever you want, and that's what I did. I went away on January 27th, 2016, and the rest is history, Came out and just put my foot to the pedal. And for those first 2-3 years, I was, meetings every day, step work, big book work, sponsee, the whole night. I needed to put my whole everything into it, because that's how I put it. That's how I used. That's how I had to recover. So,
Right.
you know, I still to this day, you know, I go as much as I can. I have a ritual every Saturday morning now. I wake up, I go to a meeting, I go buy my fish for the week. You know, I sit in the parking lot of the fish store and I just kind of meditate, and I either put up a video on, you know, Instagram, or put up one of my quotes, and I just kind of reflect on the week. And that just kind of happened by accident. You know, my friend opened this fish store and I was asked to speak at this meeting on a Saturday. So I go to speak at the meeting, and then I'm like, I got to go to the fish store. And it's literally like a half a mile down the road from the meeting. So I was like, I can't not go to this meeting now on Saturday morning. It's right here. So that just became my little ritual on Saturday mornings, you know. And, you know, my life is, it's cliche, but they say, you know, if you wrote down on a piece of paper what you'd want 5 years from now, you'd be selling yourself short. And I would have sold myself short. You know, just the peace of mind that I have is worth it all in and of itself. The material things are great, but just the fact that I could wake up, do my thing, go to work, come home, and just have a normal life is all I ever wanted. That's all I ever wanted when I was using, when I was at my worst, was just like a normal life. I go to work, come home, pay your bills, watch some TV, go hang out with the family, hang out. That's all I wanted. And that's what I have today, on top of all the other stuff, you know.
And an author, and it's a great book.
Yeah, and author. Yeah, that's, you know, I usually don't go into that until somebody prompts me on it. But yeah, you know, so I got out of treatment and I asked this guy to sponsor me. And for my first step, he made me write down my, you know, ways that I was powerless and my life was out of control and unmanageable. With and without alcohol. So I write like this 10-page thing and I read it to him, and, you know, whatever. It's kind of just sparked an interest in my head to write.
Yeah.
You know, I would speak a lot at meetings. I would tell these stories. I started writing them down, you know, and I was at work one day, you know, and at the time I was on the truck sanitation department, and me and this guy, Dennis, who he retired from the job, loved this guy to death. I shot him out of my book because he's a big reason that I wrote this book. I was writing my stories in my iPhone notepad, and he's like, "What are you doing over there?" So I tell him, and he's like, "Let me see that." And he reads it. He reads one of the stories, and it was very raw. Like, it wasn't polished. It wasn't edited. It was just like written down. And he reads it. He goes, "Holy shit." He goes, "You have a talent." He goes, "And I'm not." He goes, "I have no idea about this stuff. He's not a drinker. He's not a drug addict, but he just liked the story and he liked the way I told it." And he's like, "You really should pursue this." I said, "All right." So I started writing a little more. And then I said, "You know what? Maybe I should just put this all down and see if I could write a book." And that's how it started. And that was in late 2016, early 2017. And I got about 10 chapters in, and I got stuck. You know, I got stuck at one of the chapters, and I couldn't write anymore. You know, I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't get past that one point. So I said, "You know what? I'm just going to stop writing." And that was it. I put it in my drawer. I printed it out and I put it in my drawer. And everybody's like, well, my wife, my mother, "When are you going to start writing? When are you going to start?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever start writing again." I said, "But if I ever have the feeling, then I will. I have it here. I know where I left off." About a year later, I don't know what sparked it. I think I went to a meeting or something. I heard somebody say something, and it sparked me a little more. And then I read a book by, I think you interviewed the guy, Sam Lucania.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sam Anthony speech. Yeah. So I read his book and I loved it. And I was like, wow, this guy's a regular guy. And he wrote this book and people reading it. And I loved it and I can relate to it. And that's why I want to write this book, because real people need to relate to something. It's nice to read a book about, you know, Chris Herron or Slash or Nikki Sixx or whoever, but I can relate to their using, but I can't relate to their lifestyle. Sure. This is a guy I can relate to, an everyday guy who got up and went to work and just got caught up. So I said, if he could do it, so can I. And I actually reached out to him, and I had written a story he put on his website, and we started talking back and forth. And I said, I'm going to write a book too. and I just started writing, and that got me going again. And I got about 3/4 of the way through, and again, I got stuck. I put it down. I got promoted at work, so I was kind of busy. And about a year later, I had some free time. I got put up in this in the specialized unit that I'm in now. So my schedule was steady. I had the weekends off. I started writing again, and then I got COVID, and that gave me some time to just sit there, and I banged it out. I finished the whole book. The rest is history. Yeah. Never did I think it would get to the point it's at. Never did I think that if I sold 10 copies, I would have been happy. It was never about selling any copies. It still isn't about selling any copies, because between Amazon and the publisher, and I don't make any money. I barely broke even, but it was never about that. And the amount of people that the story has gotten to, and the amount of feedback that I've gotten back from it, has made it worth every single minute of it. Some of the people I talk to are just off the wall, hysterically funny. I got this guy in England that sends me these messages. He's actually 5 days sober now, so I'm going to shout him out. Jason, if you're listening, which you probably will, shout out to you. Keep it up, brother. He is absolutely hysterical. The stuff that he writes me, like, he thinks I'm like this famous author. I'm like, dude, I get up and go to work every day for the sanitation department. Like, I'm not this. I'm a everyday guy that just wrote a book. But if it inspires you and I can help you in any way, please. That's what it's all about. Yeah. And it's great, man. It's great. Today I got to meet people like you and Mikey and Flindt and all the other podcasts I've done, and it's just great, man. It's just great feedback that I've gotten, and absolutely, it's something that I'm very happy I did.
Good for you.
Well, I'm glad you did too, because I was telling Flindt before we started recording. So I've gotten quite a few of these. This is one I've actually finished.
Good.
But I have that same problem too. Everyone thinks I'm famous, which I am, just so you know.
Yeah, a little bit, man.
I'm the most least known voice and face in addiction recovery. You know who? I'm going to give you somebody's number, Thomas, and I want you to hound the shit out of them to write a book.
Okay.
For those listening, I'm pointing at Flindt, because this is a man of knowledge. And, it's one of the things that frustrates me. We're so busy here. I don't actually get to sit under the learning tree enough.
I know it.
We're gonna have to do one of these soon, where it's just you and I. I'm going to interview you and just have this conversation.
Yeah, I just got to say, Tommy, that I love listening to that story. There's a lot in your story that I can definitely relate to, and I mean, anywhere from the story about your dad. And except with mine, he was going to hit me with a telephone book because I told my 6th grade teacher to F off. And
so you've been this way all your life.
Yeah, I've been this way all my life. Yeah, and but no, I the story is, gosh, I know exactly where you were. You're talking about some things in there that just brought everything of my story back to life. And I know those feelings. I know those withdrawal symptoms. I know the chasing down the drug. I know it all. And it's even a couple of times I'm sitting here getting a little antsy, just because of what you were saying, because it reminded me so much about my story. But it's always good to hear that, and have those reminders, because whether you've got 7 days, 7 years, 21 years, I'm not a day counter, so it doesn't, I don't care about the number of days, but even after 21 years, I don't have that obsession or compulsion to use anymore, but it reminded me, and thank you, that I still have to keep an eye out for myself. I still, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't get triggered very often, and that did not trigger me. But it was a good, gentle reminder that I am never going to be out of the woods here.
Yeah. I want to talk about something. I forgot. I didn't forget. I was talking about it now. But the opiate crisis out there, what I think gets swept under the rug and really overlooked is benzodiazepine addiction. Yeah, because, and I tell people this all the time, and I wrote in the book, I have detox from everything. Right. Every drug out there, I have detox from. The detox I had off of Xanax combined with the opiates, but the Xanax, I thought I was going to die every minute of the day for however long it was, 3 weeks.
Right.
it's so under the radar because I feel like it's so widely prescribed because doctors just write it like it's candy.
Yeah.
And I don't think people, because I didn't know, I don't think people realize what it is. You know, it's the worst detox I ever had in my life. And I really would like to bring it more to light because it's a scary thing, because I think the opiates get the major headline, but I think the benzos are right behind it. And I think it's going to creep up on there. It's going to
Tommy,
creep up.
I've been talking about that for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
All right. The benzo issue. And you're absolutely right. When I withdrew off of, I haven't taken a benzo in almost 30 years, because when I stopped taking benzos, the only way I can describe, and I went through withdrawals on my own. It was like having the worst nightmare you've ever had during the day being awake. Mm-hmm. It was as brutal. I mean, my mind was in 75 different, satanic directions. And you're right. This benzos do not get enough play out there. This is a major issue. It always has been. Valium was developed back in the 50s. And so we have been wrestling with this for a number of years now. But if we don't fix this benzo issue somehow, that's the next one. I mean, it's already here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's already here. So it's
and you got the people shopping what they're thinking on the streets, and thus they're not getting that. They're getting what, we got fucking billboards here, Tommy, fentanyl awareness stuff, because this shit is just, there you go. Or like we were saying. Yeah. Or like we were saying, it's the ones that don't die. And then they're, Narcan or into the hospital, and then they're right the fuck back out, Right. I mean, it's, it's funny when you were talking about Celebrity Slash and Nikki Sixx, and the one thing that sticks in my head is Nikki Sixx ODing on heroin, 2 shots of adrenaline to his heart. What does he do when he gets out of the hospital? He wakes up another day later with the needle still in his arm and a pool of blood sitting in his hand. Right. This is the way this shit takes such hold of us. For me, yes, I tried a lot of drugs, but, I was a guy that I was puking in the morning, but it's like, oh, there's still a half a can of beer. Okay, cool.
I told the story in the book when I found the bottle of cough medicine, and I wanted to do the lean. I mixed it with the Sprite. And I drank it, and I went blind. I remember, but Diana, we just started going out, and she was in my apartment in Brooklyn, and she was leaving. I couldn't see, like dead blind, and it was scary. And I didn't say anything to her, and she left. And for like 2 hours, I couldn't see. Yeah. And I was like, I fucking blinded myself. This is insane. Right. And foxhole prayers, God, if you give me my sight back, I'll never do this stuff again. Blah 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 blah. 2 hours later, 3 hours later, vision comes back. What do? I go and I finish the rest of the bottle, but I drank it a little slower. I said, I drank it too fast last time. That's what it was. It's insane. I'm talking about the guy with the hiccups. I went blind and I didn't stop. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'll only buy a 12-pack tonight. And then you wake up, it's like, well, the 12-pack's gone, and somehow a 30-pack ended up in the fridge, and that's almost gone. And it's like, fucking hell, man. Flindt Andersen, you got anything else here for Mr. Fig Newton?
Well, I'll tell you what, Tommy, it's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure meeting you. Outstanding work, and just congratulations on your sobriety and what you're doing, man.
Thank you.
This has been an absolute pleasure for me to listen to.
Oh, me too. And Jason, always a pleasure, man. Anytime, anything you ever need, and what you guys are doing is great. And just please keep it up. And if you ever need me for anything, outreach, whatever you want, never hesitate to reach out. I'm always here.
You got it, Tommy. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, guys. Thank you.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
This podcast contains the views and opinions of hosts and their guests to the show. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each person is sharing their unique perspective, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. Privacy is of the utmost importance to us. For those wishing anonymity, people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect confidentiality at the request of certain guests. This website or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship. If you find any errors in any of the content of this podcast or blogs, please send a message through the contact page.